went to Wiltshire for a few weeks, as I recall, and it was a false thing, really. They thought at the beginning of the war that Hitler was going to come and bomb the living daylights out of Britain, and he didn't. There was no bombing in 1939-40. Hitler wasn't ready for that. And so everybody came home. And then after that, they weren't so fussy. People got used to the idea that they were going to be bombed. But at the beginning, it was a bit of panic. Get the women and children out, you know. We went mainly because my father had to go with his school. So he took his family with us.
Oh, so your father went also?
Oh yes, he had to. He was a teacher.
Oh, so you all stayed? Were you in the same house that you were evacuated to?
No, we were split up. Eva and I were in one cottage. Vic was in another. Jan was working in London, and our parents were in another. They were in a very posh house. They stayed with the vicar, in the vicarage, I think. I never went there actually. It would just so happen. I mean, he was senior enough. Well, they wouldn't put him in the cottage that we were in. We were in a little old like this, you know, and things. And
was that nice?
And there were real sort of country. It was called Rose Cottage. But you had to go through the garden to go to the loo.
Oh.
And it was a long drop. And the poo thing was down there. They used to have to come and empty it. You know, it was like a big poo bin. And it was a wooden plank with a hole in it. You sat over the hole. Very primitive. But that was before the war, you know, and that's how people lived in Watchfield.
And what about the water that fell on that? Didn't you...
Yvette chucked water. We had a basin in our room. There was no wash basin in those days. There wasn't plumbing anyway. So there was a basin and an enormous jug which was filled with water, cold water. We'd pour that in to wash ourselves. And I don't know, the water was dirty, and Yvette decided, perhaps I'd washed in it, and she didn't fancy washing in the same water, so she didn't know what to do, there's nowhere, so she went over, opened the window and poured it out. And down below there was an old lady who lived in the house also. It was the sister of the man and wife.
What was she called?
She was sitting by the window, probably knitting. Over a sudden deluge of dirty water and splashed over all boy that was around out there.
Did it just splash her or go over her head or just...
I think it did, yes.
Yeah.
But I mean, she was a nice...
Oh yeah, I think Yvette said was telling me she was nice.
Whitley or...
Yeah.
White something. I don't know, I can't remember. I know that Titcombe is the name of the owner of the cottage. He was a rather ignorant, gruff man. Yvette and I gave him help. Well, Yvette did. I followed Yvette, of course. There was a clock on the mantelpiece, and these old-fashioned clocks and a round place, and it used to go and the cogs go around, ready to strike, boing, at 9 o'clock or something, or 7 o'clock, or whatever it was. And Yvette and I used to try and guess when it was going to go, because we knew it was going to go. We'd say, it's going to go. He said it didn't, so I'd say, go. Then he'd go, doing. And it used to irritate them, because Yvette, the more it irritated, the more Yvette would do it, you know. And we did, we were just sometimes a bit noisy as children. There you are. Now you've got it all from Yvette anyway. I remember it well. Well, I remember not like Yvette does, of course. I mean, Yvette's 3 years older than me. Get up and get over, Rosa.
Were you given a gas mask?
Oh, of course I was. I had my gas mask. Didn't work.
Oh.
But you weren't allowed. You got ticked off if you didn't carry it. But it was completely useless. The government issued all these things. If there'd been gas, we'd all be dead. It just came over and it was rubber. As you breathed in, it went through a sort of cotton filter. Like that. And as you breathed out, it went, made rude noises, and then it came out by your cheeks, by pressure. And then you breathe in. And of course, the glass, not glass, perspex in front, was all misted over. You couldn't see anything. Daft. Absolutely daft. Mine didn't sit anyway. I'd have been dead. Yeah, I do indeed. I remember that very well because my mother cried, and so did Mrs. Martin, another lady. She cried. I didn't quite know what they were crying about. It was a nice, pleasant sort of day in the countryside.
How did you hear?
What?
How did you hear about it? Oh.
I remember it, because I've heard it since. I don't know whether I remember the words at the time, but it certainly impressed themselves. Chamberlain, the Prime Minister, came on the radio and said he had an announcement to make to the people of Britain that he had delivered an ultimatum to Hitler, the Chancellor of Germany, that unless he withdrew his troops from Czechoslovakia, a state of war would exist between us by 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. I think this was 11 o'clock. And he said, no such assurance has come, so we are at war. He didn't say war had been declared, he said we are at war. Or something like that. It's significant because if he said war had been declared, somebody would have declared war. It was a state of war that was between us. So neither Hitler nor Churchill or Chamberlain actually started the war. They both agreed to differ. Millions of men would have to die because of those two. Chamberlain was a pacifist. He tried appeasement of Hitler. It didn't work. And in the end he had to admit defeat and go to war with Germany.
Was your father there? Your dad, was he?
Yes, yeah. Well, everybody gathered around the radio because we knew what the...
And you remember that? You remember that, all gathered round the radio?
Yes, of course I do, Molly. That was significant. I was about 7, I think, then. I can remember that. You can remember the Whippet dog. You were younger then. It's like that, you know. I mean, I remember as well as you do. Silly old thing. There were no motor cars in Liverpool until about 1905. And then they saw the first ones. But when he was a boy, it was all horses. There used to be horse pool all over the place.
Did he ever tell you about what that was like? Speak about it?
Well, it's just natural for him, like cars are natural for you. You didn't think anything of it. It was unusual to see a car. You know, the very first cars you've seen.
Yeah.
But
did he ever speak about it?
Oh yeah, he used to. Not a lot. I mean, there's nothing much to speak about. There were horse-drawn buses and horse-drawn coaches and then lots of horses. There's all horses. You've seen pictures of London, for instance, with all the horses and busy streets. And boys going somming up the poo. Look at manure. Why is it that everything is about 50 or 52 miles from here? I don't understand that. There's nothing within... How far is Oxford from here?
Oh, it's about 25 minutes by the bus. 25 minutes.
That can't be 50 miles. So there's nothing in Oxford according to this. When he went to the war, Murney, and then he never went back. Oh, he went back to the university there, and then he moved to the south of England, and that was it. Just a moment, Murney. I'm trying to. I need to do this. I'm sorry. You've got a lot of information from me now. Write it up.
A teacher, oh.
Well, eventually, I mean, he had all sorts of other ideas when he was a young man. He even tried to start a music shop, teaching music. Couldn't make any headway when he was a youngster. Nobody wanted to have anything to do with it. He did have some pupils, but he couldn't make a living out of it. And he got into trouble with money, ran out of money, and he had some stuff that he couldn't get rid of, pianos and things like that.
And this was before the war, First World War.
Before the war. And there's a very curious thing had happened. He could never explain it. A man came into the shop and questioned him, quite an older man, and said, was the shop in trouble? My father said, well, yes, I just don't have any, people don't come in here and buy very much. And he said, he questioned all sorts of things about his business. And he said, well, don't worry. And he went off. A little while he came back and he said, my father shut up then, shutting up the shop. He said, everything would be all right. My father never heard from him or anybody else again. All the creditors, they left him alone. Now, I think the man was a philanthropist. He was probably a musician himself. I mean, this is pure supposition. And he saw that my father was trying to do that, teaching music and so on. And he felt sorry for him. He probably had loads of money.
This was in Liverpool.
And he probably paid all the creditors off and didn't want any thanks. And my father never saw him again and never could possibly explain why. He was very worried. I mean, he owed a lot of money back then, all the
This was in Liverpool.
Fill up the shop, there was even a piano, a grand piano.
This was in Liverpool.
Yeah, he was young before the war. He was about 23, 24. He should never have gone into business. He knew nothing about business. That was a nasty shock.
Was your dad well travelled? Was he well travelled?
No. He hadn't travelled.
Hadn't gone abroad or anything?
His best friend was called Smithers, and they wanted to join up in 1914 together. And they went along for a checkup, medical. My father was accepted A1 straight in the army. Smithers was failed, and in 1914 it was an amazing thing. And he had what my father said was pigeon-chested. I never knew what pigeon-chested was. Anyway, he was absolutely pissed off, Smithers. He wanted to go in the army because even though they were all going off to be killed. And so he signed up for the civil service, studied for a year, or two, whatever it was, became a civil servant, and put in for a posting, was sent to Ceylon, and he died there. consumption. Tropical country killed him. And when I was there, I wanted to go in Colombo and look for his grave. Because, you know, next to the Overrow was St Andrew's Church.
Yeah.
I bet there they'd have known Smithurst. Never actually
Yeah.
I was always too busy to whenever I was in Colombo, I was always there with business or looking after Toby, you know, that sort of thing. And I never got round to actually going in that church and asking the vicar if he could help me locate the grave, you know, what I might do.
And this was a very good friend of your father's?
Oh yeah, he was a very close friend.
Like childhood friend or just from...
Well, childhood, yes, and adult as well. They used to go and have a drink together, and they were both mad keen on poetry, you see. I suppose they both want to be poets. But they read an awful lot of poetry, and that was their favourite, that was their main interest.
Oh, so your dad wanted to sign up to the First World War?
Oh yeah. In those days, every young man went off.
But he wanted to. It was something he wanted to do. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to be killed, or.
Well, you were expected to. I mean, it was patriotic. It was madly patriotic. And after the war, it was completely different. Everybody was absolutely shattered with the terrible treatment they had, and all the men that died.
Yeah.
Millions. 3 million Frenchmen. 3 million. That's 1,000 times 3. France suffered. A whole generation of men were wiped out.
Yeah.
And yet they're all palsy-walsy now with the Germans. The same people. The Jack Boot was in 1880, they were, or 1875. The Prussians, the Germans, invaded France. They were in Paris. There's some stories there. Her name wasn't Olga, it was Ethel.
Do you remember her?
Yeah, of course I did. A big fat thing.
Oh.
She died, she was about 57, just stroke. She lived badly, you know, ate too much meat and stuff, you know. People who eat meat, they die young. If they eat a lot of meat, they die very young.
And she played the violin?
She played the violin, not very well. And we went to a party in her house once. And she was a school teacher. We were only little kids. We were having a great time. She was jolly and dancing around and fun. And suddenly she said, now everybody will be quiet. All these kids that were there. She didn't have any because she never got married. And she said, I am going to play the violin. Ooh. She got to stand up and also watch them. Can you imagine kids in a party, little ones, little tiny kids, having to listen to them play the violin? I mean, it was. I can only vaguely remember it, but oh God, I mean, what a killer of joy and among small, very small children. The worst thing you could do is to stop them playing and say you're going to listen to the violin.
Was she a very affectionate aunt, or
she was a jolly person? But
were you close? Were you close?
Eh?
Were you close? Was she
No,
affectionate?
I wouldn't say so. No, she wasn't very nice to my mother. She didn't agree with my father marrying a foreigner, and her father was German. It was silly, and my father was. She wrote him a letter, and she started off. I must congratulate you, dear Victor, on your engagement. What news, you know, exclamation marks, that sort of tone, and she goes on. And then she says, but let us think for a moment. Was this wise? You are a young man in a foreign country and you are marrying a foreigner. And she cautioned him and so on. He was furious because, I mean, by then he was a mature man. He was pushing 28 or something years of age. Perfectly capable of making up his own mind. And he much resented that. And he knew why. She was jealous of him getting, you know, she was a maiden sister. You know, she couldn't get married. So she probably hoped he would never get married and they'd be Darby and Joan together, you know. quite nasty, and my mother didn't speak any English when she came to England, because it was a foreign country and so on. My father spoke French, you see. And so his sister, Olga, said, I will teach you how to speak English. I will teach you how to speak English. I said, what? And my mother said she used to talk to her as though she was a child, because she could speak English. And she'd go on and on, and I couldn't understand a word she was saying, on the finer points of grammar or something like that, you see, pedantry. And then my mother would say, I see. You know, in order to say something, she felt foolish, you know, this woman going on to her, she didn't understand what she was saying. She said, Ma, what do you see? Well, that was French. She hit her. Rude. What do you see? As though she was a child. And of course that didn't create a nice atmosphere between my father and me. My father then distanced himself. Yes, he'd been very close, like he and me. You know, we were kids.
Yeah, yes.
They were very close of an age when they were small.
Yeah.
And then he went to the war. Of course, they changed, I mean, obviously, the war. And he got married. I mean, he was a man. He wanted to get married. It wasn't her business that he'd be married. My mother was a wonderful person. And he had a very happy marriage. So, you know, there's nothing wrong with her being a foreigner. My mother took to English. She loved England. And she learned English perfectly in the right manner. And so we never asked about her, but she was a lovely and very beautiful, what you've seen pictures of.
Oh, yes.
Go to front. No, he died just before the end of the war. So she was able to go to his funeral because she was able to get on a troop ship. They were bringing the demobbed people back, and you weren't allowed to travel at that time except for, well, she was bereaved person, and so they let her go to her father's funeral. But certainly couldn't go there. Germans would not have taken exception to that. You could actually get letters through, I think through the Red Cross, was it during the war? For prisoners of war and so on, they could, through Switzerland and the Red Cross, I think some letters came through. With German, I remember getting somebody gave me some envelopes with Hitler stamps on it, and a German, you know, the Reich, the Eagle or whatever it was, on there. And that had come, I think, through the Red Cross, so it had been posted, and with whatever it was, it must have gone to Switzerland and then was sent over. And I got these, and I thought they were great, you know, with my album, you know, to be able to get a wartime stamped thing. I don't know whether they were or they weren't. It would become valuable. I don't know. But, as a boy, I thought they might. You know, they might one day be worth something. Never know. Well, I haven't got them now.
Oh wow!
I think everything I gave to my flying instructor in Iraq. This boy was very interested in stamp collecting. You know.
Right. Yeah.
I think I gave everything to him, and probably that's where they went.
You never know. They could have been worth millions now.
Well, good luck to him if you found that. I doubt it. No, I suppose they were quite common during the war. You think a lot of people, and if the Germans allowed that, I suppose if a prisoner of war, not all the prisoner of war camps are all that terrible. One of my studio masters was he got his degree in the prisoner of war camp. They formed a sort of university. They had enough expertise in the prisoners to do it. It was recognised after the war, and if you behaved yourself, if you tried to escape, they threw everything at you. Mm-hmm. But if you behaved yourself and you were in the ordinary bloke in a prison, and the majority of them, they had no idea of escaping. Mm-hmm. There was only a few heroes that, and most of them got shot.
Yeah, because what was it? It is your duty as a prisoner of war to try and escape.
Yes, I know that was but that was an anachronism. I mean, that was the First World War and so on, going back to the old fuzzy wuzzies in Africa.
Yeah.
But in fact, I don't think that was the attitude in the Second World War, because they didn't feel shame. They said openly when they came back, they didn't try to hide the fact that the last thing they would ever have done is to try to escape. I went over with my mother. I was about 5 or something. I don't remember when. I mean, I wouldn't have known what my age was, but I remember going to France. I remember the dog, my aunt.
The dog?
And my grandmother didn't seem awfully fond of me. She was very, not a very soft person. Apparently what I said was very rude, and she spoke enough English to know. I don't know, of course I don't remember this, but I was sitting on my mother's lap, and she said something, "It's too big for that." And I turned around and said, "Mind your own business." They never forgot that. That is a thing
But
that has
children-
rattled down through the ages in the family.
Children will be children.
Yeah.
They do say things.
Yes.
My great niece, she was only about 3 years old. My mum took her on a bus once, and there was a rather large woman sat on the seat. And Madison just looked at her and said, "You're fat."
Yes.
Mother was mortified. You
Oh,
can't
dear.
say that.
Yes.
Carry on.
That-
Carry on. And you went over to France. Do you remember anything else? Did you meet any more family?
My cousin Denise was about 9 years older than me, and she was very keen. They got a little canoe on the canal, and she wanted to take me out. And I made up a big fuss, wanted to go with her. My mother wouldn't let, quite rightly. And she went out of this canoe and turned it upside down and swam back. And it was a very cold day. And her mother had to take some of her clothes off because little Denise was freezing. Cold, grey, miserable day.
no.
But I do remember the canoe, and I do remember her falling in because that was great fun to see it go. But of course there was all the fuss on the bank and so on. She was a very good swimmer, and there was no difficulty. But if I'd been in there, it might have been a different matter altogether. I mean, would she have pulled me out? I don't know.
Well, I can remember once when we went, I think on one of our summer holidays in a caravan. And we were very poor at that time. My father just couldn't afford to buy another pair of swimming trunks. My mother had 2 bathing costumes. One was white, covered in green mermaids. And she cut the top off and put some elastic around the waist. And my father wore those as swimming trunks.
Who, you?
My mother, she cut the top half of her bathing costume
Yeah.
off and threaded some elastic through. And my father wore them as swimming trunks. And everybody was looking
Why?
at her.
Why did you wear that?
Not because they didn't have any extra money to buy him another pair. And his old trunks had got holes in them. And my mother owned 2 bathing costumes. One the white with the green mermaid print.
Yeah. Which one did you have? The Green Mermaid?
Yeah. You see, like the red one, you see, she wasn't all that keen on the green mermaids herself.
I'd rather not swim.
Right, I'm going to go and find my mother and take her to the shops and back.
A reddish brown dog with pointed ears and very sharp teeth. But it was a very nice dog. Called Rick. Ricky, I suppose Rick would be. I don't know.
Yeah.
It had a basket under the kitchen table. I remember it very well. And I used to go, and it used to go, It was terribly funny though. I had no fear at all of it. It was one of those things. It bared its teeth at me and so on. You know, it was its basket. Nobody had ever done that to it before. It was rotten, that.
Yeah.
And then I remember the radio. Turning the radio on, playing with the radio. You know, I was just a little boy. Why shouldn't I? My uncle didn't like it at all, so he pulled the plug out, thinking that I wouldn't know. I put the plug back in again, and he thought that I was very intelligent. But I'm sure I would have seen him doing it. So that's what you do. So put it back in. There's nothing in that. Any child could do that.
Yeah.
What did you do to the radio?
Well, I used to keep on getting different stations and annoying people. I mean, they were probably turning the volume up and all that. Kids can be very annoying. They don't mean to.
The thing is that people get very attached to things that they buy for themselves as well.
Well, I don't think it was it. You couldn't do much harm to it by twiddling the knobs. But the annoyance when people are trying to talk, I mean, of course they said to stop me from doing that.
What about your French grandfather?
Not much. I didn't see much of him. I just remember a chap with a moustache who didn't really take it. Oh yeah, I remember he smelled of tobacco. He smoked Gauloise.
No, that
A lot of Gauloise, and I remember the smell. He smelled of nicotine. I suppose I smelled like that.
We probably all did.
Yeah.
Did Yvette go?
Not on that occasion. There was another occasion. I'm not quite sure. I know Yvette went to France on her own with my mother, and she had a doll and that got broken because there was a Duchess, I think it was Duchess of York, on the boat, and all the passengers would come up on deck when the ship was, waiting to get on with the damn plane, get the hell off it, and suddenly several burly sailors came along, and everybody get back, and they're all trying to get back, and the others were, there was, they were going on like that, and Yvette dropped her doll and smashed it in this stone, and then the Duchess came out and down the gangplank and got off. Then everybody was allowed to go.
Oh, it's just dreadful. Yes, it has.
Mrs. Simpson, that would have been the ex-Mrs. Simpson, I suppose. Yvette will know which Duchess it was, but I think that was the one.
She was never allowed to be Her Royal Highness,
Oh, I weep for her.
Do you remember the first time you flew?
Flew?
In an aeroplane.
Yes, it was when I went to Iraq, I suppose. No, of course not. I've flown when I went on holiday. I went on an Evacuation turbo prop. And one time I went to Switzerland, and I got on a DC-4, and they flew over the mountains. Oh boy, that was terrifying. A bloody pilot went over the mountain within about 100 feet over a range like that. He couldn't go any higher. This damn thing. That was Swiss Air. And I had a woman next to me who spat when she talked, and we were having rainbow ice cream, which put me off my ice cream. That's what they get. It was a very short trip to Milan, from Zurich to Milan or something. Why?
What aeroplane was it?
Well, there was an Evacuation that went over. What was the other one? Viscount. I went over on the Viscount. I remember the aeroplanes better than I do anything else.
Mm.
That was nice on the Viscount. You know, big seats, loads of leg room, really nice aeroplane, smooth, much better than a jet. It was quite civilized going then. You know, you were a group of people, and you were shepherded out onto the aeroplane by the hostess.
Oh yes.
Not like it is now. You know, find your own bloody way, and you know, boarding passes.
When was this?
It was in the 50s.
That's the first time I flew was in the 50s.
Early 50s or late 50s?
Yeah, the early-ish 50s. I don't remember. I mean, it was spread out over different times. Then I got fed up with that, and I quite fancied the boat and the train, doing it in a more leisurely fashion. I like the train because you see a lot from the train that you don't see from the air. You don't see anything from the air. And there was the boat until I had that bad crossing. I regretted that when I was on that bloody thing. Sick, Molly, you get sick. But flying was boring, whereas going on the train was exciting. You met people, you talked to people, and all sorts of things that happened. There's a lot of fun when you get to a station and the gelati men come along, and then they come along with these salami sandwiches, and everybody reaching out and grabbing their food and their whatever it is, a bottle of beer. You know, there was a lot of life on the stations and so on in those days. And then the people that would they were fussy over their coffee, they got enough money, I suppose, and you see them with a little circular thing like that, and a little tripod, and a little kettle on the top. They come on with all this, water in the kettle, and then they light it, methylated spirits. They boil the kettle, they percolate the coffee, and they sit and drink it. I've never seen anything like that. Some of them had methylated spirits, and it was in a lump, like a lump of sugar. They put that in and set light to that.
Oh yes, I've seen that. I know those.
They had to heat it a little bit first.
Do you remember how people dressed in the 30s at the time? Do you look back and
30s?
think, yes. Yeah.
Well, yes, I can, yes. My father tended to wear either navy blue or black. Sometimes his suits would have a little tiny thin stripe, but he was always black and very smart. And he had a great overcoat he was very proud of. I think that was almost black. Might have been black. Yes, I think it probably was black. It went low down, and when you knew when winter was there because that coat came out every winter. And it was all immaculately brushed and so on.
Yes.
He used to posh himself up.
So,
He did have a bowler hat, you know. Early on, he had a bowler hat, and then he got a trilby. He was very modern. I think my mother said, you know, you look a bit like Toulouse-Lautrec, so you better get yourself a trilby.
Yeah.
That was the height of fashion then, you know, get a trilby hat.
Well, there was a time when men didn't go out without a hat on.
No, my father never would.
My father always wore a hat
And
when I was young.
yeah.
And my mother.
Yeah, well, I think my father pretty well wore a hat until he died. It was
Yes,
quite
but-
difficult to get him out of a hat. And I used to say, well, you know, people don't wear hats anymore. And he said, well, I do. I mean, he never wore a wing collar that I can remember. I mean, he would have done when he was younger.
but street scenes and all that. Well, you weren't alive, but
I know you just remember.
Yes, I suppose I do. Yes, but he would have been more like Captain Hastings, you know, wearing a trilby hat and slightly more trendy than Poirot, who was very, very conservative, almost Edwardian in his dress.
well, I'm not talking about just your dad. I'm talking about in general.
Yes, in general, people look more like
Human beings.
Hastings.
And you remember that?
Oh yes, of course I do. I remember what people looked like.
Go on then.
But they would wear a trilby hat and raincoat, and most of them
And
quite often
always
over
a
their
tie.
arm.
Always a tie. Always.
Always a tie, yes. Every man wore a tie.
And your mother?
My mother.
Women back
my
then?
mother looked like Mrs. Brown. In the William book sometimes. Well, no, she wasn't frumpy in any way, but, you know, they
The
wore...
women
She wore
Level
beads, you know,
where
like she had she wore those big red beads like that, thing at dingle dangle. Yeah,
Oh, that's
typical
like,
of
that's
that.
like the 20s,
You know, one can almost imagine doing the Charleston. My mother was always tried to be in the fashion and all that. She used to read the Daily Express. I can remember her reading the Daily Express with these. They did beautiful drawings of ladies wearing these very smart clothes, and they were very thin, and it was very stylized, the drawings, but they were lovely drawings. And they didn't have photographs in the newspaper. They would always do the drawings, and there would be, you know, you see Debenhams or something, and they'd have the drawing of the latest trendy coat or Mac or something like that, and then high heeled shoes. There weren't many I don't remember photographs actually of fashion.
I know, well, there is actually one newspaper in one of those Armani trunks. It's a piece of an old newspaper that's got the drawings of Dior's A-line dresses. That's from the early 50s. I don't know where the newspaper came from.
Yeah, well, I think it was much better than these skinny things that they show now. Photographs of these of a lot of them.
They're all anorexic.
And they always look so aggressive